Hello and welcome to Moving Forward, a podcast by Good Habits. I'm your host, Amy Clark, and in this podcast, we make sure you get all the insights you need to build a high-performing learning culture to future-proof your organization. Whether you're an HR professional, a learning and development manager, or anyone looking to give your team a leg up, you'll learn the trends and tricks you need to get your people learning and moving forward. In each episode, we invite an expert to unpack some key statements designed to get them sharing their best insights. And today, we're talking about how to develop future skills. What should people be learning these days, and how? To help me unpack this, I'd like to welcome Martin Franken. Amongst many things, he's one of the founders of Good Habits. Thanks for joining me in the studio today, and please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us how you got into the business of learning and what's your experience been.
Okay, well, at first, it's very good to be here, so very nice to talk to you. And I've been in learning, well, all my life, of course. Learning as a kid, to learning to ride a bike, learning to read. But even in my professional life, I studied on the University of Utrecht. I did my master in educational science with a specialty in IT. So actually, I think it's 1993, so it's it feels like I'm what you would call an e-learning dinosaur from the past. But in all my life, I was professional in what I still do today in online learning and edtech and everything that's related.
And that's amazing. I mean, things have changed quite a lot in the IT and edtech space since 1993. What would you say you've really noticed the most changes since you started your career?
I think the fun part is that in general, of course, a lot changed, because when I started my career, the computer and IT was the tricky thing to try to control when you do something about e-learning. And now the computer, of course, takes over a little bit more easier. So it's more about content and more about making impact and trying to really teach people something. But we did some projects like always from the Dutch police force that we trained like 50 to 100,000 people to work with new computers, new systems, work with new ways of working. And actually, since 1993 till now, that didn't change that much, because it's still the same. Things are changing, people are changing, the world is changing. And what we have to do is learn people to adapt to these new circumstances that they're in.
Oh, brilliant answer. I love that. Thank you. I think I'm going to dive into my first statement now, because we're here talking about the future, really. Here's the first statement. Organizations should hire for soft skills over hard skills. What do we think about that one?
I don't know if I mostly agree on the hiring part. I think some wise man, I think a colleague Job said that, is that I think it's good to hire people on hard skills, but develop their soft skills, by the way. So if people get in, so if you're a marketing specialist or something like that, then you want to invite your people and you want that they understand their specialty. Like if you want to have a camera, you have to know how the camera works. But if you want to develop yourself in your career, then you need soft skills to do it the proper way, because you have to work with colleagues, you have to work with computers, you have to work with bosses, you have to work with a lot of stakeholders. And to be effective in your work, you need a lot of soft skills, and that gets you the second way. So,
would you say that soft skills are more important than hard skills then?
No. Well, it's a little bit of balance. If you want someone that really knows to do the job, and then if he only knows to do the job and doesn't work together with his colleagues, you're not going to get anywhere. If you hire someone that only has soft skills but doesn't know how to operate a camera, then you have a very bad cameraman that can work together with his colleagues very well. So like everything, it's kind of a balance, like it goes hand in hand. Like you need someone that has specifically very good hard skills in certain areas, but also has to have very good soft skills.
Let's unpack soft skills a little bit. What do we mean by soft skills? Can you give me some examples?
Also, this is an area that is in development, although not as much as, for instance, computer skills and that kind of thing that move a little bit faster than that. But I think soft skills in general, you could say, is working together from yourself to your environment in general, and working together with like colleagues, makes you a better colleague, so you can, in a team effort, reach out more. The other thing is working with people that are kind of stakeholders. That can be your wife or your husband at home, but it can also be your shareholder, or it can be a lot of people that you have to like involve in your work, in your daily productivity, because you cannot ignore them. They're there and you have to take them into account. And the other part, and I think that's also actual now happening, is that the computer and all the technical stuff is getting more and more important in your work. So also there is some hard skills involved there, but also soft skills to understand what's happening there and why people are not catching up, or helping people to catch up and making use of it in the way that it should be and that it's really efficient to help you further.
So I'm hearing a lot about teamwork, collaboration, all these things that I think make someone pleasant to work with. Do you think that's changed a lot in the past 10 years? What kind of soft skills are needed now versus, 10 years ago?
I think soft skills are getting more and more important because all the things that the computer take over get also more and more. So the human factor will be more important over the next few years. If you see what has changed over the years, is that the interaction used to be kind of simple. It was like face-to-face, like we are here now, in small groups or maybe sometimes in bigger groups, where people tend to be present in the old days. Now, for instance, just one small change that has a huge impact for a lot of people is that if I have a meeting nowadays, I am very happy, sometimes because I'm old, I'm very happy if everyone will be like present live, because then I can interact, I can look you in the eyes, I can feel what you think, I can try to involve you in my story and make sure that if I try to inspire someone, that I can reach someone. The same process now happens when people are online, and then you see a camera, and mostly the camera isn't like put in the most well position or lighting that you can really see what's happening there. So we have these meeting rooms, then people are there, and then you have to watch that way to make sure that you see the people online. And sometimes you're talking to the people online and you're forgetting that there's a live audience that you also want to interact with. So all the interactive parts become more and more complex over the years. And I think that's a huge change there.
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point there, because that really talks about technological development,
Yep.
but the impact that it has on how we interact and collaborate. I mean, for hybrid teams or remote teams, it requires a whole new level of soft skills, actually, to communicate that. So you've talked quite a bit about the digital side of things and what that needs. Are there other kind of soft skills that you see that are kind of lacking in organizations these days, or maybe that really need to be developed?
Yes, of course. I think innovation and change, like the adaptivity to change, is increasingly getting more. So organizations have to be agile, people have to be agile. So you need to develop yourself like way more like an innovative state of mind and a creative state of mind, that you try to figure out what you're doing in the first place, and not to talk about technology again, but you see and hear a lot of things, what's true, what's not, what is scientifically proven, and how can we get out of there. So like if you want to invent new stuff, it is completely changed over the years. So you have to be like working from a completely different mindset.
I think the reason we keep coming back to technology and change is the very essence of it comes down to that VUCA landscape that you'll hear a lot about if you're researching business terms or business research, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think if I think about what is going to be most helpful in those circumstances, it would be the soft skills. My question is, what do you think is the threat if people don't develop those skills to deal with that environment?
Well, that's obvious. You get stuck. And if you do what you always did, you will get what you always got. So you don't develop yourself. And if you don't develop yourself as a company, as a person, then, you will be outdated, and even in a faster pace than it used to be. So you have to keep on developing yourself, because everything is changing. So the agility and the capability to learn and to adapt to certain circumstances are huge. And it's not only technology, it's like people are changing. If you're from different generations, you have to work with, now for me, I have to learn to work with generation Z or Z, and it's changing and it's different. So you have to adapt and understand, and you have to embrace new things because it's there, and you have to work with it. You cannot deny it because you say, well, I pretend it's not there. It doesn't gonna bring you that much.
Yeah.
So
I think you make such a good example with the generational gap as well. I mean, these things really develop a lot in the workplace, and people feel, I know people feel threatened or confused, or they just don't understand each other very well. I mean, it's cross-cultural, cross-generational. That's the workforce today. It's completely changing, and yeah, everyone needs to learn how to collaborate better in those environments.
Absolutely.
On that note, would you say there are some sort of core competency areas that businesses should really focus on from an organizational level if they want to look at getting their people up to speed?
Yeah, I think for everyone should be a different answer because organizations are different, people are different. So, but in essence, like we at Good Habits, we like to try and make like a scan. It's not that complex, but like a scan of where you are, what you should develop. And for some companies, it could be that they get stuck in their own workplace and they need to develop in a more innovative or creative way. And some other companies are completely out of control in innovation and creativity, but forget that, well, someone has to pay the bills. So sometimes productivity or operational excellence or maybe a more revenue-driven organization can make sense for other people. So it depends on the people you have in your organization, what you should develop in the first place. And to know that, you have to know where you are right now and where you want to go, of course.
Yeah, and where do you think organizational goals play a role in this?
Yeah, of course, like some people say, like in their mission statements, we are an innovative company or we like to invent new stuff. And unless you are ASML or like the really high technological companies, most companies I tend to disagree. So like what you do want to do is like deliver a very good service or a very good product to your clients. And if you want to do that, then you need your people to get in line with that goal. So I think it is very good to set a goal that is realistic and like very specific in certain ways, and that can help the organization to grow towards that goal. But don't make it too high over or holistic or whatever. It's like keep it practical.
Well, it needs to be actionable. I think people can get overwhelmed if goals are a little bit too wild. Yeah, that makes sense. What you're saying is, work from that, set the goal, see what you need to achieve, look for where you're lacking, and then set your people on those paths. And
simple.
To be competitive, I think
the gap.
9 times out of 10, that's going to be good soft skills.
And don't forget, if you're there, you're probably already too late. So.
Oh dear, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, because then society and everyone catches you up already, and then you have to develop again.
Oh, then you need a new goal.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I think we can move on to our next statement then. Your employees' skills define their success.
I definitely will agree with that. It's quite simple. I had an example. Let's say the marketeer, like let's say you do marketing and you hire people by their hard skills. That's what I said before. Then you come to a certain point that they work in your organization for, let's say, between 1 and 3 years. Everyone knows how to do their stuff because they're trained to do that. And then look at how people's careers are developing. And then you can see like who is getting the promotion, who is getting the higher salary, and who is getting the best career in that company. And that's not the people that has the best marketing hard skills. That is the people that can inspire best, that have the most creativity, that are the people that work best together as a colleague, can influence other a little bit better, and they get promoted in the end maybe until director or CEO level. And it's not because they are a better marketeer per se, but it's because they work better together and they can plan together and they can reach their goals. And it's all about soft skills there. So.
I have to agree, but I do have this question. We often, when we think about promotions or succeeding in your career, we think of more management level responsibilities. Would you think the same applies to somebody who's really going for a more specialist career? So say someone from my team wants to become a really professional writer. Their goal is to be the specialist in writing this kind of content for this kind of audience. Where would soft skills fall in with that kind of a more sort of hard skills related career path?
If you are in the, for instance, for the writing, I think still it is very important that if you're in a bigger organization, then you work together with other people. So you have to understand what your role in the total process is, unless you're maybe like this very famous novel writer that's only working alone or whatever. So, but let's keep that out of the picture there. It's like you're part of a team, so you have to work together with your colleagues. So I think a lot of soft skills are required there too. The other part is that if you understand your audience a little bit better and you try to really listen to your audience and try to dig into like what are they really feeling, then you understand your audience, then you probably will be a better writer and a better influencer. And you try to, it is depends on what you're trying to tell, but I think your goal will be reached easier when you understand your audience and the people around you better.
I mean, I have to agree, and I think this applies for a lot of technical fields. I mean, when I went to university, it was kind of universally known that the engineers in our faculty kind of weren't very, they didn't have very good communication skills. And I see it now. My husband's an engineer in his company, and he is so frustrated by the sort of lack of fluidity between the departments and lack of collaboration. And everyone's got this mindset like, but I'm good at my job.
Yeah.
But they're not playing ball. And I see that this will be the differentiator for the engineers that get to succeed a little bit more in his team.
Yeah, if you look at engineering, and I think there is only one exception, and sometimes maybe an engineer can be that exception. So maybe you can tell your husband that too. It's like, but it's if you are really, really good in what someone does, and you lack any form of soft skills, I would say build him a palace on a very high mountain and make a very big fence around it, but keep him or her do the work that she is so brilliantly doing in the first place, and then organize. For all the rest that have like slightly lower talent, soft skills come in pretty handy to make it more efficient in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, everyone can develop a little bit. And I mean, you don't want to isolate people, rather take them along for the learning journey.
No, but if someone is very good in hard skills, please, if a very good specialist, well,
fine. That's
something different.
Yeah, I guess it happens. There'll
like
be
the very like the Olympic champions. That's like they fall out of this category.
So we've talked about sort of these different individuals, and they might have different needs on how you confront them with their skills development. How do you go about identifying those individuals in the company that maybe have this potential to grow, and how would you maybe sort of map their development or their career paths in the organization?
Normally I would say you have two ways to look at that. In one way is what we try to do as Good Habits. We always try to find that, let's say, magical moment where people have like the very high need to learn something. Like one simple example is when you get promoted to be a manager. It is awesome. You get like promoted, you get a new function, and then suddenly there is 5 colleagues staring you in the eyes.
You have no idea what you're doing.
And it's like, oh, what are you doing now? It's like, and then you need like desperate your skills about what can I do now? And then the urge and the motivation to learn at that point is quite high. The other way to look at it is that individuals, like this example that I know, I think everyone can agree easily on that that's the case. But normally people find it very hard to define what skills they lack because they don't have it. It's like they're not aware of the skills gap.
The blind spot. I mean,
they have a blind spot. So what we normally tend to do is we try to help people to find the skills gap that they need to develop themselves in a certain way. And you can do that easily. It's like if you want to be like a fireman, you need a driver's license, and you know how to use, like you understand your fire and your water and what happens when you do that. I think for every career and for every opportunity, there is a chance like that you can easily say like, this is what I want to be, this is where my goal is, and this is where I am now. And then it's just like, it's like a navigation system. It brings you from A to B, and we can help people to do that. And I think that's
you make
essential.
It sound so easy. Like you just know where you're missing your skills and off you go and learn them. But how do you really find out what you're missing? Because I mean, when I first became a manager, I think first of all, I didn't even know enough about the job to know what I needed. And then to have the own sort of self-awareness to know what you're lacking in that moment. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think it starts with a little bit of self-insight. And if you want to learn, the first thing you have to acknowledge is that you're not good in everything that you do. So you have to be a little bit vulnerable in the first place.
Humble.
So humble and stay back and say, okay, I think I can be better in, let's say, another thing. So then the self-insight is that doing a lot of assessments, we always promote to do as many assessments as gets you to know yourself a little bit better and also feel on the areas where you need some development. And then there is the easy path, like if you're really an extrovert like me, then it's easy to do public speeches and you can do a presentation, and it's not hard for you to develop in that way. But if you are also a really extrovert and a little bit on the red side, for the people that every now and then take an assessment, sometimes the listening part can be a little bit challenging. So I have to teach myself, like, okay, Martin, back down, silent, and now listen. Is that what you mean? Can we help you in that way? And so basically the answer is be vulnerable, be humble for yourself, and then open yourself to learning. And then, well,
I can tell you that hosting a podcast is a great activity if you want to learn how to listen more.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned this self-insight. I'm actually just busy reading this book called Insights by Tasha Eurich, and she talks about the whole nature of the self-development journey. And of course, it starts with a self-insight. But what is alarming in the studies that she's looked at is people generally tend to completely overestimate their abilities. I mean, you have like the Dunning-Kruger effect, for example. So I think having some way to actually test these metrics is a good idea. You mentioned assessments, so I think it's probably a good idea for everyone to take one now and then.
Yeah, but it also helps. Like, I still remember the first time that I did a test, like, okay, this is who I am. And I was like, okay, I can relate to that. This is who I am. But I gave the answers myself, so this is actually true. But what it also does, it helps you to understand, like, to really assess quickly how other people are, what they are like. So, this is also an extrovert. So maybe we will work together easily, or maybe not. So, and it helps you a little bit. So your own self-insights help you also to be a little bit more...
Just like we were saying earlier, collaborating and connecting with our changing workforce as well.
Yep.
I think we need to move on to our next statement now. That is, with changing demands and skills comes a change in how to learn these skills. What do you think about that one?
Well, of course, in all my career, I was always like finding the new ways to learn. And back in the 90s, it was quite simple, because if you introduced a computer in your learning process, you were all like kind of a god figure.
High tech.
Like you were really high tech. Now, I think everyone who's not doing anything with the computer is like, like the dinosaur. But it's evolving very quickly. So what you see now with AI coming up, of course, is that there is like a huge opportunity on one hand to improve the personalization of learning, so like that you can fit the learning especially to the needs of the individual learner itself. And in the other hand is to take another step and leap in how we learn. For instance, if you try to practice a conversation, like you want to give someone bad news, or like that could be a course, then you can practice nowadays already with your computer before you can talk to the real people. And it sounds a little bit silly, but it can really help you, because it can make yourself insecure if you want to do difficult conversations.
And also, what's the alternative? I mean, I've written plenty of content about how to manage conflicts and how to give feedback and all these things. But until you're doing it in the moment, it's actually quite hard to learn these skills out of a book. So it makes sense that you can use AI for that.
It is, of course. So, and I'm not going to say that you do not need any practical, because if you do difficult conversation, you can practice with your computer whatever you can. And nowadays, the computer can give very smart, very real life, and very creative answers already that are just for real. But if you see the tears in the eyes of the person across you,
hard to prepare that.
That is like a real person. It is different. So you can. There's a lot of things, a lot of things that still the computer cannot help you in learning.
Yeah, I mean, at least you can become prepared. But I suppose
you get better,
sometimes,
especially in soft skills. Like in hard skills, it already was, but now in soft skills, we get better and better in teaching through the computer. So
yeah, absolutely, and then sort of taking it into practice, because some things, you just have to learn by doing. I mean, you can't solve everything with a computer program, I guess.
I think luckily not.
Let's talk more about personalization. You mentioned that. How does that help with learning? And what do you really mean by personalized content or personalization?
I think everyone small anecdote. I spent more than a year on my boat teaching my kids primary school at that time.
Oh, yeah.
So normally kids on primary school, they go to school for 8 hours a day, and it's mostly for the relief of the parents, so they can have a little bit of rest, I think. Because what we did is we self-schooled our children on the boat. We had 4 of them, 2, my wife, I did the other 2. And what we did is we self-schooled them for more than 1 year. And the interesting part is that it took us only, of course, I'm a professional educator, so it helps a little bit. But it took us only 1.5 to 2 hours a day to teach them the same content that they're teaching in schools. And so that probably means that the other 6 hours they are learning probably a lot of very important social skills, working together, playing, etc. But from the content perspective, like trying to learn and personalize things, if you understand it, you move to the next subject and you can speed it up very quickly. So you can make learning way and way more efficient if you personalize it. And I experienced it by doing that on the boat, by in one-on-one relation or one-on-two with my own kids. But if you look at it from another perspective, like you can use the computer to personalize the learning journey for everyone, the effectivity of learning and the effectiveness of learning increases dramatically by doing that.
Yeah, I suppose, for example, if I wanted to have a particularly difficult conversation with a team member and I kind of could personalize the feedback I get to the particular challenges I have with this person or my own issues, I mean, the learning outcome would be a lot better and a lot faster, actually.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's time to move on to our last statement. Earlier we talked about sort of the changing times of learning and development from when your career started and in the last 10 years. Let's talk about how fast things are moving now. The statement is, L&D professionals can't keep up with ever-changing skills demands. What do we think of that?
Yeah, well, that's a tricky one because it's always a little bit difficult. But I think the world is changing so fast. Like, for instance, for us at Good Habits, I think 5 years ago, everyone still wanted a library for their learning management system because everyone needed a lot of content. If you look where we're going now, is that the environment is changing so quickly that we have to change completely to personalization, to really making impact on the learner and really achieving measurable goals that you can see, like we deliver happier people, we deliver more measurable productivity for the organizations itself. And in that, I can see the role of the L&D professional is changing. And we see quick clients changing with us quickly to make the move to that. And we see also clients that have a little bit of difficulty in the agility to move towards these new ways of learning. Because sometimes it means you have to say goodbye to your very expensive and very big projects that you spent on these complex learning management systems that has no possibility to personalize learning in whatever way it is. Or to your very big libraries that you cannot cut into small pieces and can reassemble to do like this personalized learning journey. I think every L&D professional nowadays should be aware of the fact that the personalization of learning is coming quickly now, and that every colleague and every person in your organization, that you are like obliged to help them in a personalized way. And sometimes, well, I think now that's not always the case. So there's a lot of room for improvement on that part, to say it politically.
Well said.
Yep.
And in terms of getting that learning content out there, do you think there's some skills that are more in demand now that learning and development managers should be focusing on?
Well, personally, I think that soft skills, and especially the ones that are involved in critical thinking, creativity, positivity, still very important in this world, and understanding all the different generations and the way of working, like that, understanding people where you're with, I think they get increasingly important. So what we always do is every year we make kind of an assessment. What are the things that are important now? And of course, connecting with the new technology that's coming up is very important, and everyone will give that answer. And so aside that answer, which I agree with, I do want to emphasize that all the soft skills that are connected to the human factor becoming more and more important, because people will drown. You will lose people literally in the process, and all companies that are not connected and not agile enough to change, they will drown in the process.
Yeah. So what I'm really hearing is that it's not so much that the skills that are in demand are changing, but it's more like the level of demand, the level of importance based on other factors that are changing, how we're collaborating, how we're working.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned earlier identifying people. We talked about how to get them on a learning path. Where does the role of the company culture play in getting people learning, sort of more intrinsically?
I once had a big discussion with a client, not longer a client anymore, to be honest. And he was like, Martin, I am not satisfied with the Good Habits library because our people are not using the Good Habits content. I said, well, that's very sad to hear that. But what's the case and why is that? Yeah, I don't know. They're not using it, so I don't know what it is. I said, well, okay. Let's ask you the next question is what's your favorite course yourself that you would promote to all the people in your company? What do you mean, Martin? So now, what is your favorite course of Good Habits? To be honest, I do not know. So well, I would be surprised because I did check your profile. It's not for privacy reasons, but I did check before and I saw that the last time you logged in was 2 years ago. So if you want to create a learning culture in your organization, I think the best way to start is doing it yourself, showing and setting the example, and telling the organization how important learning is in the first place. And if you are only about work, productivity, revenue, and structure, and do not learn and promote learning in any way, then nobody will learn. Regardless the way you will offer it, like instructor-led, online, with AI, without AI, we don't care. I think the only thing that's really important, set the culture in your organization that people have room to develop themselves and create the culture that it's good and promote it, that people actually do stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree about leading with example. I think it's so much more powerful. Like, despite the fact that people get to leadership positions, I think it's too easily forgotten about. And I know why. It's because leaders are dealing with so many other things. But, you know, if they're not learning themselves, they're also not maybe going to deal with those things so well. But what more can the learning and development professionals do? Because, of course, it comes top down, but they have a really crucial function, I think, in triggering people.
Yeah.
How can they go about that?
Well, it is about giving the right example, of course, but it is also about if you set your goals to something and embrace the fact that you do not know everything, that the things that you want to develop yourself are sometimes scary if you yourself do not have the answer. But I would say get used to it because it's getting more and more that it's going quicker and that you don't know the answer yourself. So you need your team and everyone to learn with you. So I think learning goals should be implemented in every goal of company that you do, because embracing the unknown is also embracing the future a little bit in that part.
And I'm hearing an opportunity for team learning in that sense, because
Absolutely.
You could all set a goal together as a team. You need to learn X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I might just implement this in my own team, especially if it doesn't necessarily need to be a technical thing. I think when we look at learning goals in a team, we're often thinking about like what is directly related to the thing that we are making in this team. But with the soft skills approach, you can start looking more about the dynamics and...
It is, but it's like the interesting part is that Bart, our CFO, he's a very smart guy. It's supposed to be for a CFO. So he was very confident, like a small anecdote about, he was very confident about his own skills and intelligence on solving puzzles and all kind of tricks. So he did that in a big class and was like solving the puzzle. And of course, everyone put it in, was like, he was on top of the class. So he was very proud. It was like, I'm the best. I had the highest score. But then the teacher in the class did something quite interesting. It was like, he put all these different groups in place with all these different people, and he let them all do a similar test again. And the fun part was, of course, Bart was very proud because his group won again, because he was also one of the smartest guys in the room. But the interesting part was that from all the groups, the group that performed the worst of all the groups had even a higher score than the individual score of Bart. So I don't have to give a better example about the power of teams than that, I think.
Yeah.
So thinking you can solve everything yourself, I think, well, it's a complete miss there. So do everything with your team in this case.
And with that, how do you think learning and development professionals can really anticipate what's the next thing that has to be learned by the people in their company?
Keep everything fluid. It's like everything you think you know the answer, probably a new answer will appear on the horizon. So don't think about like, okay, I have to solve a puzzle and this is the solution and now we go and move in that way. I think everything you have to be organizing from now into the future, keep it fluid, keep it agile, and make sure that you can change whatever way you can do it. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think...
It's like you don't have the time anymore. That is.
What do you mean by that? You don't have the time anymore.
Everything is moving so quickly. It's so fast. Even if you look at like the AI coming up, it's like ChatGPT-1. Everyone was very impressed, and now you can talk to a computer, and in 1 year you will be completely blown away. So
something that's coming through for me is really, it's a lot about curiosity, because I kind of feel like between the lines and sort of question everything. Even if you think you know,
yep,
just be curious about it.
Critical thinking, that was one of the competences I was trying to promote, I think. So
say some more about the importance of critical thinking.
I think there's so much things happening. So, and when everything is moving, and now the social media and all the regular like sources of information are maybe sometimes questionable, let's say it at the least.
Yeah.
I think critical thinking and being like very critical in everything you read, hear, say, whatever you do, I think applies to everything in society right now. So
it's quite the challenge, I have to say. I mean, of course, at Good Habits, we're in the business of creating content and making sure that we have our critical thinking hats on when we're in that process.
Absolutely.
It's a challenge. There is a lot of nonsense out there.
Yeah. I think we're very proud that we were, I think already 8 years from now, we published the course Recognizing Fake News. And it was even before this certain guy became president in the United States. So sometimes we see things coming, but now, again, new things are coming up and it's getting more and more important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all we have time for now on our statements and discussions. To end off, I'd like to ask you for one key takeaway that you think you'd like to leave with the learning and development professionals or any of our listeners.
Maybe the one thing that isn't mentioned yet now. So I like talking to you and I had a lot of fun. And I think one of the most important things, and if you look back in your career, if you look back to your primary school or whatever, I think making learning fun should be your biggest takeaway. Because why should you make it boring when it can be fun?
Awesome, I love that. Thank you so much. For my takeaway, I think something really important that you mentioned there is that soft skills are really for everybody. I mean, as much as you're a technical professional or you think they don't apply, they're for everybody.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us. That's everything for today on this episode of Moving Forward. Please catch us next time. And in the meantime, give us a rate and review. It helps other people find this content and help their people move forward too.